Good morning. Is my microphone working? No? Yes. No. Yes. They're just loud. Okay. No, that's great. Be loud. Actually, let's actually cancel and let's just have a party. Go eat French toast. I do make really good French toast. That's you don't prove it? Okay. Not right now. So early on in my ministry, I got the opportunity to do all of the really fun stuff, like set up and tear down, like loading and unloading the bus. During when we were church planting, we got to load and put all of the church equipment, kids' church equipment, speakers, signs, projectors. You know, you learn some things throughout that. Projectors don't bounce. Maybe there's a better system than just throwing it all in the bus. But I got to do a lot of really fun jobs. One of the jobs I got to do was to change the starter on the bus. That was fun. So I always joke that I literally got thrown under the bus. But along with those really fun jobs, one of the jobs that I always got sent to do was to run to the airport. And I don't know, like, if you know, our airport is in Kansas. It's not close. It's not in Colorado. You can say it is, but it's not. When you land at DIA, it looks like you're landing in Kansas. This one particular time, I got sent to the airport. I don't like parking lots. I am usually somewhere inside of my own brain when I go into a place. And so because of that, a lot of times what happens is I will walk into a place and come out and have no idea where my car is. That's a problem at Walmart or Target or King Soopers. That is a major problem at the airport. And this particular time, I was on the phone when I walked into the airport to pick up this. I was picking up a guest speaker. It's like this was a long time ago. We picked up this guest speaker. This guest speaker was like somewhere in between a life coach for pastors and like he yelled a lot during his sermon. Like I don't think he needed a microphone. He yelled a lot. But let's focus in on this life coach thing for pastors. Because at this time, I'm pretty early on in my ministry. And I have to say, one of the things that is my greatest fear is looking incompetent in front of a stranger. Yeah. That's my... So because of that situation, the last thing that I want is a life coach for pastors. I wouldn't have signed up for this. I didn't sign up for an appointment with this guy. I didn't sign up for coaching situation. But so here I am. I'm at the airport. I'm on the phone. Told the other pastor at the church that I am walking into the airport now to pick up our guest speaker, hang up the phone, walk in, find him, walk out of the airport. I can't find my car. I can't find it. And the speaker is asking me questions, trying to get to know me. And a lot of these questions are like borderline coaching questions. Like, what is your greatest struggle in ministry? he wants to give me a free session in the parking lot of the airport. What is your greatest struggle in ministry? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm sitting here pushing the panic button on the remote on my car, hoping that the car will go off somewhere. But here's the thing. You have to be somewhat close. And there's a whole floor of the airport parking that if you get off on the wrong floor, there is no way to get to that section, which is where I was parked. I'm sitting here and he's asking me these questions, these coaching questions, and I'm pushing the panic button and I'm about to lose it. Like this is my greatest fear, like feeling incompetent in front of a stranger. Like this person is like asking me really pointed coaching questions about what I struggle with in ministry, and clearly he's formulating his own opinions. Literally 45 minutes of wandering around the airport. And he doesn't know what my car looks like, but even if he did, he wouldn't be helping because he's too busy asking me questions. And the more questions he asks, the more frustrated and flustered and overwhelmed I get. Finally find the car. Put his suitcase in the back seat. Get in the car. Go to leave. Go to the parking stall. Can't find the parking slip. Keep in mind, he's still asking these questions. Still asking me, what is, maybe you might consider like an organizational system or something. Maybe, have you considered like having somebody coach you on organization? And I'm like sitting here trying to figure out where this parking slip is. Because here's the thing, if you don't, this is early on in ministry, and I didn't want to pay $100 to get out of the airport parking. I didn't want to pay for parking at all. It was already going to cost me because I had taken the free time and used it to find my car. I'm sitting here trying to find and looking in the console, looking underneath me, and he's not helping at all. He's not even looking at all. Finally find the ticket. He was sitting on it. By this point, I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want to be his friend. I don't want friends in general. I just want to get out of the airport. And then I get on 470 or out on Pena Boulevard, out in front of the airport, and my car. I mention this because it's important for the story. Like we at the time were driving a car that had lots of miles on it, and this little Honda at the time burned a little oil, and because it burned a little bit of oil, if it got low, it would go into like this safe mode. And so I went to go accelerate onto the highway to get us out of here and to drop this guy off at the hotel so he would stop talking to me. And the car goes, wah, 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 wah. So I have to stop at the $9 a gallon gas station that's in the median over by the airport to pick up a quart of oil. It felt a little bit like I got off on the wrong foot with this guy. Like I didn't make a great impression. It's funny. He was there. He was doing some coaching for our team that weekend, and like he kept on bringing up these things that it felt really, really like a jab. It did. It felt like he was like, well, maybe you guys could work on some organizational stuff, or got off on the wrong foot. There's a difference between the expression, the best foot forward, and got off on the wrong foot. One of them will prevent the other. I think a lot of times when we come to Scripture, when we come to for people who don't grow up in the church, they don't grow up going to church, or maybe they had a bad experience at church, their first encounter with the idea of who Jesus is somebody who was loud enough to proclaim. Now, I want to give a little bit of a caveat, because sometimes Christians get a bad rap, and I'm not making excuses for Christians who get a bad rap, but you have to understand there was a whole period of time in the church where we were actually instructed to go be terrible out in the world. Like we were told, hey, you have to get like an activity that we made youth do who don't know anything about anything is to go stand on street corners and go tell people that they don't know about Jesus. And what could go wrong? Except for the leading questions that we gave them to answer. Have you ever, we were instructed to go up to strangers in the inner city and ask the question, what would happen to you if you died tomorrow? What? Are you threatening me? So for a lot of people out in the world, their first encounter with the idea of Christianity, the idea of the church, is not necessarily a best foot forward kind of scenario. It's not a scenario where they walk away and they're thinking, man, I want to be a part of that group. And so we're kicking off a series this morning that will go through the month of February. It's about love. Fits for February, right? Series is called Crazy Stupid Love. I am sorry. I realized that part of the challenge is that using this as the title will make you think of Ryan Gosling without his shirt on. And I'm sorry for that. You're not sorry? We're going to be looking at stories that kind of demonstrate the personality and the character of Jesus. Because I think that if we want to present the best foot forward when it comes to what it means to be a follower of Jesus, what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a part of a community, we want people to know Jesus, right? I mean, that's what my hope is. And the reality is like you have to have a starting point. When we're talking about creating the best foot forward and not starting off on the wrong foot. Sorry, some of you are still distracted about Ryan Gosling. Focus. We have to have a starting point. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to take everything that you know. I know that this is impossible. But I would like you to take everything that you know and just set it on the shelf over here. Like just put it over there on the windowsill and just set it aside for a second. What if God was just like Jesus? Let's think about that question. What if today, let's take everything that we know about the Old Testament and New Testament, everything that we've experienced in the church and outside of the church, every controversy, every scandal that has to do with Christianity, and we set it aside and we just ask the question, what if God is just like Jesus? I personally, this is personally what I believe. I believe that God is just like Jesus. Je- Jesus says, if you know me, you know the Father. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father but by me. And a lot of times that scripture is being used as a statement of exclusivity, but more than that, more than a statement of exclusivity, it's a statement of saying, hey, if you want to know what the Father's like, if you want to know what God, the God of the universe is like, you got to know me. And so if that's the case, if that's the thing that we're going to the starting point that we're going to look at, I'd like for us to look at a story this morning. The story starts in John chapter 4. And a couple of things. I like whole stories. I don't like chopping things up into little pieces. So there's a lot here. We're not going to dive too deep on every line of this, but there are a couple of things that I'd like us to pay attention to as we do this. Whenever you pick up in the middle of a story, it's really important that you actually ask, where did we come from? John chapter 4 is 4 chapters into the book of John. That's why it's called that. John chapter 4 is well into the story. And so I always like to ask a question when I pick up in a passage like this. I like to ask the question, where did we come from? What's happening in the chapter before this? And in the chapter before this, John is testifying about Jesus. John the Baptist is testifying about Jesus, about who Jesus is and what Jesus is doing. And John has started to create quite a bit of controversy. He's baptizing people left and right. He has disciples. He has followers. And the thing that starts this chapter, verse 1, now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. So if John is creating controversy, if John is causing people to be concerned, then how much more is Jesus causing people to be concerned? And so Jesus left Judea and went back at once to Galilee. It's really interesting because there's a road between the Judean area and Galilee. There's actually several different roads that go between Judea and Galilee. And Josephus, one of the ancient Jewish historians, talks about how for most Jewish people, when they travel between Judea and Galilee, both of these are Jewish territories, will take the long way unless they're in a hurry. Unless they're there's an emergency, unless there's a dire need to communicate a message, the short route is a 3-day journey. So they would go 4 or 5 days on the long journey so that they didn't have to go through Samaria, because that's where the Samaritans lived. So Jesus, it says, starting in verse 4, it says, now he had to go through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria. And he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. So from where he started to where he stops for the journey is about 6 hours. It doesn't seem like Jesus is in a hurry. Like he could have traveled the rest of the day and gotten out of that territory and into a safer space. But he doesn't. He stops at noon, beside a well. What it doesn't tell us until a little bit later is that Jesus actually sends his disciples into to the town to get food. Jesus hangs out at this well. And I think it's important for us to remember the time frame that it says. It says that Jesus is stopping around noon. It's hot at noon, right? Or maybe it's not. Maybe we forgot up until the last couple of days what hot was like. It's when you go outside and you sweat. That's hot. So Jesus stops at noon of this day, and out comes a woman to the well. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" I just want to pause and say, there are some confusing things that happen in this passage. Like, if somebody walks away, both the interaction with this Samaritan woman and later on the interaction with the disciples, there's like Jesus is, I don't know if he's intentionally being obtuse or intentionally trying to be confusing, but some of the things that he says are really interesting because he says, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples has gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to them, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan." A Samaritan woman, yes. "How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." How can you ask me for a drink? Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God," this is the part where his response is really interesting. He says, Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." I don't know. I try to imagine what this woman's response to Jesus is. Like, she's looking at him. Does he have a canteen somewhere that he's not telling me about? Did he run into a stream on the way here? And if he did, why is he asking me for water? She says, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water?" She goes on and says, "Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again." So the woman immediately begins to dive into the differences between Samaritans and Jewish people. She immediately jumps into why this is a weird situation, why this shouldn't be happening, why he shouldn't be asking her these questions, why, like, he immediately jumps to the differences. It's like, what, are you saying that you are greater than Jacob? He says, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." See, there's a couple of things that are interesting about this story. Clearly, there's some the way that this woman was approaching the well is out of the ordinary, because most women wouldn't go to the well alone. That's dangerous. You want to go in a group of people. There's safety in numbers. She was alone. And you wouldn't go in the middle of the day because it's hot. So there's something interesting about the dynamic that comes to the table with this woman. And so when she responds to Jesus' offer for living water, it's no wonder that she's like, give this water to me so I don't have to come to this well anymore. Every time I come to this well, when I come to the well with other people, there's scorn. The people who know my story are there, and they don't have a problem rubbing it in my face. Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. He told her, go call your husband and come back. She says, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you said is quite true. So Jesus peels back. He peels back part of this woman's story. He peels back what's going on in this woman's life. And it's clear to me that the things that Jesus just said are exactly what she was trying to hide. The part of her story that she was trying to hide desperately. She was trying to move beyond this part of her story. She was trying desperately to move beyond this part of her story. She's trying to move beyond being the woman who's had 5 wives. And the question is, what happened here? Maybe you don't have that question, but I wonder, what happened here? It's possible that she's been a widow 5 times. If that's the case, who's going to line up to be her next spouse? Could be that she's been a widow a couple of times and also been divorced a couple of times. Seems problematic. The fact that she is not sending a servant to the well to draw water most likely means that she's not well-to-do enough that she would have been the one initiating a divorce, which means that everybody would have assumed it would have been her fault. So she's walking through this story, through her life, with all of this shame. She's trying so hard to hide it. And Jesus peels back the veneer. And here's the thing that's interesting about that scenario is that, I think we all have that spot where, if we peel back the veneer, the thing that we're afraid of, the thing that we most don't want people to know about us, the part of our story that is most challenging, we're afraid if that veneer gets peeled off, that the people who see will recoil, will pull back from us, or they'll ask us coaching questions. But that's not what happens. Jesus doesn't withdraw after having peeled back the veneer. Jesus moves in and moves closer. They go in, she tries to divert the conversation with a deep theological question about the differences between Samaritans' belief in God and Jewish belief in God. And Jesus says there will come a day when true worshipers will worship in spirit and truth. It's not about this mountain or that mountain. In some ways, it's like she recoils herself and pushes the differences back in Jesus' face. She pushes their differences, the thing that are different about what they believe in, different about who they are, and different about who they worship and how they worship and what she thinks. And she pushes that in Jesus' face. And Jesus said, it's not about these mountains. It's not about where you worship. It's not about any of these things. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know. For salvation is from the Jews, yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. They are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. And what kind of worshipers are those? The ones with the veneer ripped off. The ones that show up without pretense. The ones that show up and recognize that there's so much more to their story. The woman says, I know that Messiah, one of the things that does unify the Samaritans' belief about God and the Jewish belief about God is that they both believe that at some point somebody is going to come and save them. And she says, I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. And it's so funny because in so many of the stories that you read about Jesus, like Jesus is withholding. It feels like he's withholding information. And sometimes like he specifically says to the people who show up and who he heals and does miracles for, he says to them, hey, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. When Peter says that you are the Christ, he tells Peter, hey, good job, don't tell anybody. Jesus never comes out and says this to anybody except for right here. The first time Jesus openly admits is to this Samaritan woman, and he says, I, the one speaking to you. She's talking about the Messiah. I, the one speaking to you, am he. Verse 27 says, then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. I love to point out the little funny things. They were surprised to find him talking to a woman, but no one asked, what do you want? No one asked this woman, what do you want? Why are you talking with her? But clearly they were thinking it. They wanted you to know that they were thinking it, but they didn't say it. I didn't say it. Then the woman, leaving her jar, went back to town and said to the people, come and see a man who told me everything I did. Could this be the Messiah? Come and see a man who told me everything I did. Like, that statement by itself, come and see a man who told me everything I did, that's terrifying. Pass. Why is she not reacting that way? Like, out of all of the people, like the people who had the most to try to pretend and hide, the people, like the person who has spent all of her energy trying to evade people seeing into her story. Like, The entire setup of the story is a setup of her trying to hide her backstory, trying to hide the things that she's ashamed of. And all of a sudden, something shifts in her. And for the first time ever, she encounters somebody who sees her for who she really is and doesn't draw back. She left her water jar and ran and became the first evangelist. The encounter that she has with Jesus so transforms her that she's no longer ashamed of her past. She's no longer ashamed of her story. She actually takes her story and uses it as a way of sharing the love of Jesus with other people. And there's a very interesting thing that happens right after this. After she runs into town to go tell all of these people to come out and meet Jesus, the disciples who are just showing back up are trying to encourage Jesus to eat. Say, Jesus, eat something. And this is another one of those funny dynamics. Jesus, eat something. Jesus says, I have food that you don't know about. What? Somebody bring him food? And he says, the food I eat, the food I have to eat is to do the will of the Father. And he goes on to talk about the disciples had just come from the town where this woman is going to share the good news. The disciples had just come from there. And Jesus starts talking about the harvest. Jesus starts talking about the harvest being ready. And that workers are being sent into the field. The disciples just came from there. It's not them. It's this woman. It's this woman whose life has been full of shame, has been full of disappointment, has been full of hurt, heartache, goes in and shares the good news about Jesus, and the crops are coming in. The harvest is coming in. The people are coming in to hear and see and know Jesus. I think for a lot of us, we all have a story. One of our values as a church is we all have a story. We all have a story. We all came from somewhere. You show up here in chapter 4, right? And the question that we ask is, how do we get here? How do we get here? We all have these parts of our stories that, like, if other people knew them, we're pretty sure that they wouldn't like us. We're pretty sure that they would be disappointed in us. We're pretty sure that they would recoil from us, that they would pull back, that they wouldn't want anything to do with us. If God is just like Jesus, you can't hide that from him. And instead of recoiling from whatever you've gone through, your story, your pain, your hurt, your background, whatever has happened to you, whatever you have done to you, whatever those pieces of your story that you're ashamed of, Jesus sees those things and leans in. And rather than recoiling, he leans in and he speaks directly to those broken places. He speaks directly to the wounds and the hurts and the places that you are afraid to share with anybody. And the absolutely beautiful thing about this story is that Jesus, in recognizing and acknowledging and in healing this woman's wounds, these wounds become the thing that give her the power to go out and do the thing that God has called her to. The parts of her story that were the most embarrassing, the most shameful, the most difficult parts of her story now become the most powerful parts of their story. It's like when you go camping and it rains the whole time. And it's cold, and Alexa brought no clothes. She's wearing everyone else. Sorry, this was supposed to be a hypothetical story. It's like all of those crazy stories that happen to you, whether it's a car accident that you're in, or it's the tragedy that you experienced, or it's the way everything went wrong later on. After the healing has come, after all of that has come, that becomes the best part of the story. Have you ever noticed the people who love to tell stories? It's not the people who are the best storytellers they don't just tell stories about the good things that happen to them. Nobody likes that person. The person who's like, their story is like, everything went good for me. I won the lottery and I won this other thing, and that's not good storytelling. The most difficult parts of our story become the thing that God redeems. They become the thing that God turns into the linchpin of our testimony. They become the very thing that, if we let God use them, changes everything for us. I'd like to invite Tony back up. The song we sang at the end, I will build my life. God, like, I don't believe that God does the crazy things that happen to us, the ugly parts of our story. I don't think that God does those things to us. I think we live in a broken world that we experience pain and trauma. I make dumb choices. I make dumb choices that cost me dearly. But I believe that God can take those pieces of our story, those broken places, and turn them into something beautiful. So this morning, I would like to invite you to encounter Jesus. To encounter Jesus. If God is just like Jesus, the thing that I want most for you is for you to get to know Jesus. I'm going to pray. Tony's going to lead us in this song. God, I thank you that you take all of my broken places, my hurts, my wounds. You uncover them, not just to reveal those places, but to heal those places. God, I give you these broken places in my life, these broken parts of my story. give you my shame. Lord, I can trust you.